Chapter 21, Part 2. Will held out his right hand, palm facing the rear, fingers pointed up. Stop. The team stopped, taking a half step off the trail, and took a knee facing out. Jim, the last man, turned and faced their back trail to cover the rear. Will keyed his radio. They're just up ahead. I can see a tent. Dave radioed back. Roger. Tony, go up with him and initiate contact. The team were all listening and dropped their packs, going prone behind them. Tony was next behind Dave and scurried past him, heading for the front. They were 3 days into the mission, and this was their first contact with refugees. Will and Tony approached the little camp slowly and cautiously. When they were a good deal closer, Tony called out, "Hello in the tent." They heard a multitude of sounds coming from it, a child asking, "What is it?" and a woman's voice saying, "Hush," inside. Then they heard the distinct sound of a bolt being worked, and a man with a scoped M1A stood up from behind the tent. "What do you want?" he asked, his eyes nervously surveying the uniformed and armed men in front of him. "We're from the New Hampshire militia," Tony said. "We're here to help." "How do I know you're not ISAF?" the man asked. "Do we look like Germans or traitors to you?" said Will. "If we wanted to capture you, we would have encircled you." "I'll lay down my weapon if you want, and come up, if you want to parley." The man looked at him. "Why don't you just get the hell out of here?" In the tent, a little sneeze and voice said, "Mommy, I'm cold." "Because your kids are freezing, you're alone, and there's an as-if patrol over the next hill waiting for you." "How do you know?" asked the man warily. "Because we skirted them yesterday. Look." Tony laid down his Car-15. "Point that thing away from my chest and I'll come up alone." Tony put both his hands where the nervous man could see they were empty and walked to the tent. "We've got a medic, blankets, and food. How about we talk?" Feet crunching on the snow, he approached. The man got a better look at him. Unshaved, wearing obviously homemade overwhite, and using old-fashioned web gear, he didn't look like the army or their accomplices. "Why are you running?" Tony asked. "They had me on a list. Arrested and detained twice. I figure I better get before I wound up locked in jail." Tony nodded. He knew the feeling. "How long have you been on the trail?" "About 10 days. It's slow with the kids. I've got 3 friends covering you, you know." Tony looked around. "We know you're alone. Look, we're not here to hassle you. We've been sent to help out. I escaped a few months ago with my family, and the militia helped me. Why don't you let us help, all right?" The man said nothing, mulling what Tony had said over in his head. After a half-minute or so, he lowered his rifle. "Okay, Melissa, it's okay. They're here to help." A muffled voice from inside the tent said, "Are you sure?" "Well, if they aren't, we're toast anyway. Come on out." The zipper made its distinct sound, and a bedraggled woman came out, bundled in a bright ski jacket. She leaned back into the tent and said, "Andy, keep your sister warm. I'll be right back." Standing up, her hair was a mess, her eyes red, her cheeks pale, and she was shivering. Tony smiled disarmingly, as did Will. "Ma'am," said Will with a nod. She looked around nervously. "Hello. You're here to help us?" "Yes, ma'am. We've got blankets, food, and a medic to check you out." "You have any hot food?" "No, we didn't want to risk a fire." "We'll take care of that." Will again keyed his mic. "We're secure. Come on up." "Okay," came the static-filled reply. "I've asked the team to come up. We can cook up some hot soup and check out the kids. How are they?" "Cold and sick. Amy has a cold and their clothes are wet. We're having a hard time drying them out." "Well, we'll do what we can." The team came up, carrying Tony and Will's packs. Sam smiled at the woman. "Hello," she said. "Can we help you?" With Sam's appearance, the man and woman relaxed noticeably. The ISAF forces wouldn't have a young girl along. Tony told the man, "This is Dave. He's in charge. Dave, they have 2 kids." He turned with a questioning look at the man, who nodded. "Who are cold and wet. One's sick and they need dry clothes." "Thanks, Tony. Can you, Will, and Sam set up a quick perimeter? Put claymores out, and Will, watch the back trail with the 40, okay?" "Okay, Dave, I'm there," said Will, rucking up. The German grenade launcher was attached to the outside of his Alice pack. Jim, get your kit and look at the kids, will you? Dave looked at the parents. Jim's trained as a paramedic. He's got some medicine and things that may help. Ma'am, can you show him to the kids? The woman nodded. Of course, right this way. Jim walked up and introduced himself to her. I'm Jim. I only play a doctor on TV. Dave stuck out his hand. Dave McGrath. The man took it. Pat Woolard. Tell me, what brings you here, Pat? I'll put some food on. Well, I had this rifle I never turned in, and I told them I sold it, but they didn't believe me. Dave prepped his Firefly stove as the man talked. He filled the pot with a can of chicken noodle soup, which he remembered was a hit with Tony's kids. When Pat finished, Dave said, Well, Pat, you've done a good job of getting your family out, but the border is more secure than before, so maybe we can help. We have a few resources available that I think will speed you along. Jim came out of the tent. How are they? Dave asked. Cold and tired. I had them take off their wet clothes and put them in a sleeping bag. Their mom's going to get in too and warm them up. Is the soup ready? Almost. Good. Sir, do you have any cups or mugs for the kids? Yeah, in the tent. The name's Pat. Pat, I'm Jim. Your daughter has the beginnings of bronchitis. Her tonsils are huge and her lungs are filling with fluid. I'd like to get her out of here ASAP before she gets pneumonia. I'd like to get her out too. We'll see what we can do, said Dave. After ensuring the kids each had as much soup as they could eat, Dave sent Jim out to relieve Sam. In short order, she approached Dave. What is it, boss? And gave him a mock salute. Dave knocked her hand down. What are you doing? He said, his voice low but firm. Trying to attract snipers? Don't do that. Sam looked chagrined. Sorry, Dave. Dave smiled. Just don't do it again, okay? Sam looked slightly relieved. Okay, Dave. I need you to get in touch with NHDF HQ and let them know we have 4 to evacuate. He pulled a laminated map out of his pocket and then wrote down some information on a small pad. He tore off the sheet and handed it to her. This is our location, encoded. We have 2 adults, 2 kids. We'll need to know how they want them and keep the transmission brief, right? Just like we practiced, Dave. No problemo, said Sam. She went back to her pack and started setting up her radio. Pat, said Dave, your tent stands out pretty well here. Let's do something about that. I have this white poncho here. After covering the tent, Dave told Pat he was going to check on his team. He put 2 cans of soup on the stove in the largest stainless cook pot and then sent them back one at a time for a canteen cup of soup. It was cold in the hills in December. He sat with Sam, who told him the message was received and that she was waiting for an answer. She suggested putting out the solar charger for the extra battery, which Dave did. On the back trail, Dave stood off the trail in a small stand of pine trees that stood about 5 feet above the snow. Will had shown him the clacker where the Claymores was and where the mine was aimed. He scanned the back trail with his pocket binos, the heat from his body causing the lenses to condense. After 10 minutes or so, Will came back and relieved him. Thanks, boss. That was a much-needed boost to my core temperature. You're welcome, Dave replied. How are you doing? Good. This is a great day to be outside. If you want to wait a minute, I want to put on my snow pants. Sure. A few minutes later, Will came back wearing a pair of black ski-mobile pants. It's getting colder. I think we'll have snow tonight or tomorrow. I hope so. It will slow up the as-if guys. Dave made his way back to the tent to talk to Jim. How are they? Better. We put their clothes in the bag and they're drying out. The kids are warmer, and I gave the girl aspirin for her fever and a cough suppressant for her cough. How are they feeling? Waiting for word now. Could you check the team? Frostbite, feet, you know the drill. You got it, Chiefy, came the reply. Jim secured his kit and went towards Tony's position. After an hour of waiting, Sam got the message from the NHDF HQ team. Her gloved hands quickly copied down the encoded Morse transmission. She translated and then decoded it for Dave, having learned how to use the code book during the team's 3 days of prep at headquarters. Dave read it and got his map back out. They were to meet a truck, codenamed Pilgrim, at the side of the road 3 miles into occupied territory and a mile or so more to their west. He plotted a route. They had until 7 a.m. the next morning to get there, which gave them over 14 hours. He decided to get moving before dark to try to put some distance between them and the ISAF team to their north. Pat, Sam, could you come here a sec? The team was using the trail. The snow was fairly well broken by others who had passed before. By the footprints, they were mostly civilians going north. Will led the way backed up by Tony. Dave was next, then the family. Melissa and Pat herding their wards, Sam and Jim in the rear. The FRS radios the team had were indispensable for maintaining contact with the front and rear elements of the team, as the point had a tendency to get far ahead, and the children slowed the back half considerably. They marched for a few hours, gaining about 2 miles map distance. Dave stopped them at a curve in the trail to check his map. Point, there's a side trail coming up. We want that. Roger, came the terse reply. Wait 5 and move out. Do a short recon of the trail and report. Will broke squelch twice to indicate he understood. Jim made sure the kids were still okay. He gave them some hard candy to cheer them up a little and returned to the rear of the column. After 10 minutes or so, which the party took time to attend to personal matters, the team's toilet paper was greeted warmly by the family. They again headed out. Will made his report shortly thereafter. Looks clear, no traffic signs. Hard going. Dave broke squelch twice back at Will. Reaching Will and Tony, they saw that the trail led down a more exposed hillside, and the snow had drifted in places to a depth of several feet. He could see where Tony and Will had broken through on their recon. Again, stopping the team, Dave had them put on their snowshoes, a donation from a local bed and breakfast, which had them for guests to rent. Using ski poles, Dave, Will, and Tony took turns leading the party down the hill, breaking a path for the family which didn't have snowshoes. Several falls later, they reached a more level and wooded area, and the going got easier, although it was hampered by the lack of illumination. Only starlight guided them. Tony looked back at Dave. How much further? Not much. I want to get closer to the RV point before stopping. We need to cross that road we talked about, and then we're home free. Dave guided them to a stand of pines, walking well past them and then using a technique called a fish hook to lead them back to it via a different route. He put Will and Sam on a small ambush to cover the back trail in case they were followed, which, with the snow, was a likely possibility. I want to check out the road ahead. Tony, you're in charge here while I'm gone. Will and I are going, and we should be back in 2 hours or less. We'll use the radios when we come back. If you hear gunfire, or if we tell you to move out, go back up the trail and take the small spur trail we passed as far as you can. Find a place to lie up and radio HQ to let them know the RV is compromised and get new instructions. Any questions? No. Okay. Will and Sam are on the back trail ambush. I'll relieve Sam. Relieve her in half an hour or so. No fires, but keep the kids warm. And we're not staying here, so don't set up camp, he added for Pat's benefit. Leaving the way they entered, he briefed Sam and Will on what they were doing. Will and Dave moved out, rejoining the path and following it for half a mile. We'll drop our packs here and find a place to cross. Dropping their packs, they camoed them as best they could. They then moved out, Dave in the lead. The path took them up to an open area. Stopping at the edge, it was apparent that the local builders had been busy. Rows of houses lined the road, smoke coming from many of the chimneys, and weak candlelight peeked through curtains up and down the road. Well, what now? Inquired Will. Let's go back and go further that way. He pointed left. Looks like the houses end closer that way. They went back and recovered their packs and headed through the woods. It wasn't as easy as the path, as the myriad of small bushes and low tree branches grabbed at their packs and snowshoes with every step. Arriving panting and scratched at another field, they saw it was a glade in the wood, perhaps a remnant of some old airfield from a long-forgotten farm. They skirted the edge, Will turning every so often to cover the rear. At the far end of the field, they came to another path, this one a local one, probably used by local people for walking. They again entered the woods, paralleling the path until they reached the road. There were no houses in sight. Splitting up, they checked out the woods to either side for 100 yards or so, looking for a good place to cross. preferring not to use the path's entrance. When they met at the path, Will said, "There's a likely-looking place back my way. A stand of laurel and a cedar for cover not far from the road." "Good," said Dave. "There's nothing my way. Let's get the rest of the guys." Carefully retracing their route, they had radioed the team when they felt they were close enough. Sam answered, and she was instructed to bring the family and the team down the path. Getting the family up and moving took a good 15 minutes, so it was half hour or more before they met up with Will and Dave on the path. Dave told Pat that they had a way to go, but they should have a few hours to rest before they were picked up. Pat nodded his understanding, which Dave barely made out in the dark. Suddenly Will radioed, "I hear something." The team all stopped in their tracks. "Quiet and don't move," hissed Tony to the family. Dave pulled the earpiece out and listened. Sure enough, it sounded like a helicopter, or more than one, heading their way. "Everyone against a tree. Pull your packs over yourselves. If they have thermal, it will help to hide us a little." For a few seconds, the thing the team heard was their rustling off of packs and crunching of snow as everyone scrambled for concealment. Then, all that could be heard was the throbbing of heavy rotor blades as the birds drew near. Suddenly, the helicopters were over them and past, a formation of at least 5 helos. Dave knew them to be Black Hawks by their sound. Soon, the sound of the big helicopters faded. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief as they got to their feet and rucked up. The rest of their movement was uneventful. They crossed the road without incident and had to skirt a large plat on the other side. They came to a spot not far from the RV point, and Dave called a halt. "We'll stay here for now. We have 4 hours until we need to get ready, so I'd like the kids to sleep. We can do rotating shifts for us. So set up 2 fart sacks, 2 hours on and off. Will, Jim, take the first watch. Set up a claymore on the back trail and one towards the road. Will, hand off the 40 to your relief. Sam, can you and Tony help set up hooches for the Woollards?" Sam and Tony got their rucks and told the Woollards they would make them shelters. First, they chose a spot free from trees. Sam trampled down the snow while Tony snapped 2 ponchos together, making a tube. They then laid that down and bungee corded the corners to nearby trees. Using the hood and a bungee, Tony lifted up the roof by securing that to an overhead branch. They then used a ski pole to prop open one end. They used the packs to block the other end. They then put down one of their space blankets on the floor and the Woollard's 2 self-inflating mattresses on that. They told Tony to put his bags in there, feet to the open end, and to put Melissa's pack at the end to block the wind. They gave them 2 wool blankets that the NHDF had provided refugee teams, and these went over the bags. It was low-tech but effective. They left the family preparing to sleep and built one more using their sleeping bags. Tony deferred to Sam and allowed her to go first. He set his bag up opposite Sam's, his modesty amusing her. Dave spent half the night asleep against his pack, the cold waking him ever so often. When he awoke, he checked on the security teams and resumed his fitful sleep. At 5 a.m. sharp, he woke up the 2 sleeping militiamen and the Woollards. He prepped a pot of water, heating it to make cocoa and coffee. After packing, everyone got a dose of hot drink and moved out once again. Dave set up security at the spot Will had found. Tony, Will, and Sam were covering their back trail. Dave took a few minutes to make the signal at the roadside, and he and Jim were covering the flanks. The Woollards were in the middle, about 70 feet from the road. At a few minutes to 7, they heard a truck engine coming from their left flank. Dave tensed, his hands on the firing device for the claymore he'd put out. A Mayflower moving van slowed and came to a stop just past Dave. The passenger got out of the truck and started kicking the tire and whistling the theme to Gilligan's Island. Dave whistled back with the Andy Griffith theme. The man turned to the woods and then looked left and right. "Coast is clear, let's hurry up." Dave signaled to Pat, who was watching him. "That's your ride, get going." Pat and Melissa got the kids up and struggled with their packs. The man opened the side door on the truck and boosted the kids up. Dave heard him tell Pat and Melissa to push the big boxes up against the doors and to hide in the wooden crates. He shut the door and, whistling again, he got back in the truck without so much as a glance back at the wood line. In moments, the truck was gone in a cloud of diesel smoke. Dave called to Jim on the radio and had him pull back. When he got the all-set signal, he recovered his claymore and went back to meet Jim at their packs. They then called the rest of the team, who recovered their mines one at a time and rucked up. They headed back the way they had come and made camp in a thicket on the opposite side of the trail from where they had spent the night. They again made a small camp, sleeping bags, and a low shelter for two. They crammed 3 into the shelter for the first sleep shift, which made it a cozy tent. Tony and Will stood watch first. At noon, they awoke the sleepers. The guards ate a quick, cold lunch. Will had been carrying his MRE entree in his shirt pocket, so his was at least lukewarm, and racked out. Dave had Tony and Sam eat, and they all took turns cleaning their weapons. They then cleaned Will and Tony's rifles for them. As dusk approached, they woke the sleepers and made a quick hot drink apiece. Just as they were finished stowing the stove, they heard the sound of voices. They all froze. They were coming from their back trail. As they waited, the voices got louder. "This is so obviously a BS detail," said one voice. "Well, let's get it done quick so we can get back and get warm. This cold sucks." "Yes, it does," agreed a third voice. Dave suddenly remembered his Sten and pulled it from his pack. He pulled the bolt to the rear and inserted a magazine. He made a motion to Jim, who passed it on around the team. He made sure the selector was set on auto and waited. Footsteps crunched on the crusty snow as 3 American troops came up the path following the snowshoe prints. All had M16A2s and one had a radio. The team stayed still as the men came to them, intent on the tracks. As the men drew abreast of them, Dave fired a short burst into the first man, stitching him with 3 rounds in the torso. He quickly shifted to the middle guy and hit him in the head with 1 round. The first man whirled and fired a 3-shot burst into the path even as Dave ventilated him with another burst of 9mm. "Will, Sam, strip the bodies. Jim, watch the path. 15 seconds, commanded Dave, letting them know that they would move in that time. "Tony, take point." Dave saw Sam remove the radio from the first man. "Get the radio from Sam and listen to it. Go." Sam was delicately stripping the dead man of his gear even as Will finished with the second of his men. Dave ran up to her and said, "Just grab it off him." He reached under and unbuckled the man's GI LBV and pulled it off, the man's limp arms flopping as the vest came off. "Take this and cover the rear," said Dave as he passed the vest and rifle to Sam. He then emptied the man's pockets, placing the contents down the front of his shirt. Finishing, he called to Jim, "Let's go." Jim and Sam got up and followed Dave and Will up the trail, moving as fast as they could. Dave called to Tony on the radio. "You get anything off that radio?" "Yeah, they're sending a team to investigate. They heard the shots and got frantic when the guys didn't answer." Dave thought fast. "Sam, Jim, give me your claymores. Did the vest have any grenades?" Sam and Will dropped the vest and went through the pockets quickly. "1 each, Dave, here." And Will handed 3 frags to Dave. Leave me 1 vest and go," said Dave. Per SOP, they would go up the trail 300 yards and wait for Dave and Will. They knew what to do if Dave and Will didn't come back in an hour. Dave said to Will, "Follow me," and headed up the trail. At a bend, they prepared 1 claymore, making a tripwire with a prepared material Will carried in his pack. They quickly tied the base to a tree using 2 black zip ties that were attached to the base. Will strung the thin wire across the path and tied it to another tree. Dave screwed the electrical blasting cap into the mine and connected it to the 9-volt battery with the attached connector taken from a child's toy. "Ready?" he asked Will. "Yeah, let's go," replied Will, getting to his feet and going. Dave radioed ahead. "We're coming. Keep going." Click, click, came a reply. The team met at the main trail. "What now, Dave?" "We go down the trail and try to move to another path. We'll put up a few signs further on saying this way is compromised. Hopefully that will work, and we'll continue our mission in our secondary area. Let's move." As they headed up the trail, they heard the echo as a pound and a half of C4 behind a matrix of 750 steel ball bearings detonated. They all hoped it was in the faces of ISAF troops. As a special bonus, Will left 5 more tripwires, all attached to nothing, along the way. If they were followed, it would hopefully slow the pursuing troops. 4 days later, the team was again at NHDF headquarters. They had escorted a group of 14 people, 3 families, out of Massachusetts, catching a ride in the back of the same moving van. They had learned that the moving man and his cousin, the co-driver, had another cousin in the Massachusetts National Guard who was commanding a border checkpoint. He let them through without inspection every time and enabled them to save a number of people. After a debriefing, they were shown shower rooms and given a chance to clean up. They put on clean clothes and met in the main mess hall, where they hungrily ate a second breakfast. Dave reported to them that the liaison had told him to keep the rifles they had captured, as well as filling the pickup they had driven to the inn with supplies. Medicines, ammo, more weapons. The gas tanks were full, and the motor pool staff had changed the oil and filter, as well as repacking the front bearings with grease and lubing the chassis. It was a quiet ride home. While they felt they had done some good, it seemed like a wasted effort. 2 of the 17 teams had basically disappeared. 3 more were shot up badly, and only 4 others had helped refugees. The others gathered some good intel that would undoubtedly help the cause, but while they had been gone, a German recon team had been captured near their town by the remaining militia. Even as they sped home, an NHDF interrogation team was there questioning them.